All right, and we're back with another episode of the Career Bound podcast. This morning, we're going to talk about something that's been brewing in my mind recently, but really important at the start of your career. You don't have all the hindsight of later years in your career, so something that I've learned over the years is like the importance of getting a head start in order to build momentum so you have more options later on. When I think about this, it's about like the value of this is like ditching the default timeline, which I think is the title of this episode, where, the average young adult spends 18 years in basically pre-adulthood, and then you are continuing to prolong adulthood in college for 4 to 6 years. And then suddenly you're on the other side of this, you have student debt, and you're finally given your first chance to go out and like try stuff for yourself. And that's sort of the start of most people's journey in doing the tough work of figuring out what it is they're good at, what it is they want to spend their time on, beginning to design their life in a way. And this morning, just want to kind of openly discuss some of the downfalls of delaying that, as well as some of the advantages of starting that process a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one. I'm ready to kind of have some very strong opinions about this. I hear from a lot of different sources and people. Like the common advice to young people that, successful people that are further into their career is like, oh, you have time. Like you're 18, you don't need to take your life so seriously yet, like go to college, like enjoy that experience, and, you'll figure things out along the way, which, frankly, like a part of me, definitely resonates with that. I don't think you need to throw out all of that, the general message that comes with that specific advice. But I think overall, like we are like people tend to encourage young people to, just take their time and kind of like stay in that gray period of like, all right, you're no longer a child, but you don't have to rush into full adulthood and full career mode just yet. And, I think a lot more people need to hear like, get a head start, like be the kind of person who's, kind of taking themselves more seriously, really like developing a strong bias for action early on, and don't just wait until you feel like you're in that kind of like pre-approved age range to fully become an adult, which seems to be extending more and more as the years go by. Like, if you're 17, 18, 19 and, you kind of look around and just like, feels like something's off in terms of, what opportunities you have access to. Like you want to do more, like follow those instincts and like get your career started. Like, your goal shouldn't be like, oh, I want to delay, adulthood and kind of like serious stage of life. It should be something that you embrace at an early time. And I think like that can lead to a much more fulfilling and like fun overall, like life, quality of life for yourself. So I'm excited to talk about this and get into it. But yeah, I think we have to stop telling young people like it's okay to
be a
continue
child,
delaying like, the real world. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like torn on this too, because I think, and we've talked about this in the past as well. Like, I think the baseline maturity level for like the average 18-year-old is declining. And I think that, that's not a knock to young adults. I think they've been set up to fail that way. I think part of the problem is like the expectations have shifted so much. Like really, most people don't expect much from people until they're in their like late 20s now. Like the realistic expectation is by the time you're 30, maybe you're into your career or whatever. maybe mid 20s, like 25 to 26, you're finally going out and developing independence. And I think
Mitchell, they say like, oh yeah, like by your mid 20s or your late 20s, that's when you should have your act together.
Yeah.
And, it's okay if you're kind of in not a serious mode up until that point. And there's value to, kind of like taking your time, being in more of like a wandering mindset, having different kinds of life experiences, etc. Like I'm all for having, a variety of life experiences, but you don't need to just be in career mode for the rest of your life from like 18 and onward. But I think that's very, very different than, setting out with like, hey, I'm going to live and build my life intentionally. And I'm going to get that started at as young of an age as I possibly can.
Yeah. I mean, you said something earlier, and I'm kind of with you and against you on this. Like the tendency for people to be like, you're 18, you don't need to be in any hurry. And I think that, one, you do have a lot of time, but two, like the longer you delay that, the harder it becomes to make more deliberate choices that do not fall into sort of the pre-approved status quo. Like the longer you sort of stay on the default timeline, the harder it is to break and be like deliberate about, okay, well, all my friends, everybody's doing this. This is what you do at age 22, 24. I'm finally graduating college. So the next step is this. And that's where the tide is taking me. It's very hard to jump off that course and be like, no, now I'm going to go blaze this trail after now 22, 24 years of like just playing the same game. It becomes more difficult every year to sort of reprioritize the secret passions that you've been wanting to go explore, but instead you've been like sticking to the status quo. I think this is why, there's such a thing as like midlife crises, is people, they get into their careers, they begin to take on all these entangling obligations. They get married, they get a mortgage, they have a car payment, they've got childcare payments, they've got all this like weight of things, the plates they're spinning. And they never went and like critically asked themselves, like, what is it I want to work on? What is it am I good at? All of those things that they want to do. And they have this sort of longing for going and finding that. And you get to a point where it's like, I'm trapped. I don't have the option to do that now. It becomes more difficult, like as time passes and you enter different seasons of your life and you have more responsibilities. And so while there is some truth that you don't have to be in a rush to jump into your career and like just go start earning money, I do think that there is sort of a finite window of time early on where you have the luxury of freedom and a low cost of living and limited responsibilities and limited expectations of you, really.
Yeah.
Go take advantage of that rather than just like deferring, that.
Well, time is on your side, and it's up to you if you're going to sit around and waste that opportunity, or if you're going to take advantage of the fact that time is on your side. Like, I think one of the biggest cases for like getting into like career mode at an earlier age than expected is what you just said. Like, you have lower expectations, and because that is not the norm, like for you to be like 18 and 20 and being like, hey, like I'm going to bypass the, kind of delayed or the extended childhood, extended adolescence that, college and the general expectations of people like 18 to 23 have on them. I'm going to skip that and get started early. You have the huge advantage of expectations of like, oh, wow, you're 18, 19, 20, and you're doing the kinds of things that, we're at like, as a society, we expect 22, 23, 24-year-olds to do. You're going to like be able to like have people rooting for you more, and they're going to be more likely to like want to help you access certain opportunities, etc. It's still like really hard work, but like I think that's a huge advantage of like you have just given how the world works today, you get to tell this story of, hey, like I'm starting on an accelerated path. And the way I look at it is like, everybody has to go through this kind of process of like getting their career started, figuring out what they want to do, what direction they want to pursue, what they're good at, what they enjoy, etc. And the earlier you get started on that, the more like forward momentum is it's easier to build, even though, technically it might be, harder to start that process at, age 18, 19 instead of 22, 23, because you have a little bit less life experience, but like the quality of life experience doesn't, mean it's going to be any, that much greater, 4 to 5 years later.
Yeah, I think something else that you pointed out, like it's worth going into a little bit more detail on, is like when you are ahead of the curve and you're working on things that are perceived as like overly ambitious for your age or something that you're like 5 years early on, not only do you have people rooting for you, but the bar for you being perceived as a very impressive person is so low. Like if you're a 16-year-old, you're entering your career, like you're perceived as some kind of like wunderkind prodigy, like there you have that working on your side. And that doesn't mean like people expect you to be an expert. In fact, sort of the opposite is they respect your hustle and your willingness to like jump out there, and they know you're going to make the mistakes. And I think they're generally more open to help you along that way because you're young and you're like hustling and doing it. Like you're afforded a lot longer leash if you're starting out earlier than if you're like 25 and you're entering the workforce. People like already expect you to know what to do and like to be an adult.
Yeah, I think the easy way to kind of frame this is if, let's say if you're able to land yourself like an internship at a, just kind of like a cool company you're excited to gain experience at. If you're 18 and 19 landing that internship, you can kind of ride like your work ethic and your character to, kind of greater opportunities. Whereas like if you're 23 and you're just kind of getting those early career like internship opportunities, your work ethic and your character is seen as table stakes, whereas at 18, 19, like that's incredibly impressive.
Yeah. And it's not to say that you're like behind the curve and you need to feel like you have to play catch up if you're in your early mid 20s, like, and you're just going out and doing these things, but recognize like the way you're perceived is going to be different. Like the floor is higher for what's expected of you. You don't have to feel like this sudden sense of urgency if you're 24, 25 years old and you don't have it figured out. Like you still need to do the tough work. You don't have to feel like 10x the amount of pressure because you don't have it figured out. But I do think it's important. Like the older you get along that curve, like especially before you have a ton more responsibilities and your cost of living has creeped up and like all of those things, like take advantage of that window of time. Whether you're 16, whether you're 25 right now, if you're still in that window, go take that time seriously and put it to good use, because what happens zoomed out in the long run, we've talked about compound interest. I don't know how many times in how many different ways in episodes here, but that compound interest over 10, 15 years in your early career, it can be advantageous for you or it can work against you. If you spent the first 10 years sort of floating around without any clear direction, it doesn't matter if you change jobs, but like if you weren't deliberate about what you were trying to accomplish, the experiences you were collecting, the skills you were building, when you get to 30 or you get later on in your career, like people aren't going to care. They're going to expect you to still be able to do what you should be able to do at that age and stage in your life and career. Conversely, like if you spend the first 10, 15 years going all in, even if you do change paths several times, but every single one of those experiments you conduct is a deliberate one where you're trying to get either information or context or more clarity, or you're building skills or gaining experience or whatever it is. Maybe you're working jobs that are below your status because you can make more money and save more money and be in like whatever your goal is. If you spin that first leg being more deliberate and taking advantage of a time in your life when people don't expect a ton of you, and you kind of like you're sowing seeds that you can reap later in your career.
Yeah.
But if you don't do that, you're going to be in a spot where you don't have the same level of optionality, and you kind of have to figure out how to make it work without having the luxury of time and without having the luxury not only of time, but the luxury of that freedom that comes when you're young and expectations are low and your cost of living is low.
Yeah, I think that's all true. Like I would like, you said earlier about, hey, like if you are in your mid-20s and you feel like you're just kind of getting this more deliberate process started, you don't necessarily have to feel like you're playing catch up. And I do understand what you mean by that, because there's still, if you start acting now, like there's plenty of opportunity. And I think, in many ways, it's not valuable to kind of look at your position in life and be like, oh man, like I'm behind the 8 ball and I got to catch up, and because most people usually do that because they're kind of comparing themselves to this default timeline and like, oh, I'm supposed to like get a college degree by this point. I'm supposed to have my first like career job by this point, etc. Like, if you're just comparing yourself to the like default timeline that other people, like the outside people on the outside have expectations of you, or kind of like the expectations that you feel kind of broader socially and everything. I don't think that's very useful, but I think the best way to look at it is like you're comparing yourself to your own potential and what you are actually capable of. And I would say like, I think most people in that position like should have a chip on their shoulder about like, heck yeah, I do have to play catch up. Like I have expectations of myself that I want to live up to. And I do feel like behind the 8 ball in some ways. And again, it comes back to like, have you been kind of approaching your career and life overall intentionally or not? So I think like if I was talking to someone individually, I would tell them like, like if you feel that way, if you feel kind of like you've moved on a slower timeline than what you feel like you should, as long as that like expectation is coming from internal sources and not arbitrary timelines that the outside world puts on you, then I would say, that's probably a good motivating factor to go kind of accelerate your work and everything. And then going back to, the value of getting started at an earlier age, I think there's so much like value in that from like an internal personal development aspect. I think it's very powerful to feel like, hey, like I'm 18 and I'm doing things intentionally that, most 18-year-olds are not doing yet. I think it breeds confidence, and it kind of, I think another big thing is it accelerates the whole kind of like career discovery process and stuff. Like you're doing things 3 to 5 years ahead of schedule. And that just means like, if you're doing that right, like you're going to build more self-awareness, self-knowledge on what you do like to do, what you're good at. You have 3 to 5 years to like build valuable relationships. Like relationships have, huge compounding interest over time and everything. I was like, what is the downside to getting a head start in this way? I really can't think of much. Like, I guess like the devil's advocate case would be, well, you're missing out on
the kind to be a kid again.
Right. don't get to be a kid again. You only have that kind of like, not just college, but like college lifestyle that people talk about is obviously a big one. Like you're missing out on that. But I mean, I went to college. I had those experiences. Like, yeah, like I had a good time. I built friendships, and I'm still friends with people today from that kind of time period in life and everything. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's BS to say like, oh, like that's worth kind of being in this like gray area of like adolescence, as opposed to being like, yeah, like you're fully capable of doing more than what's expected of you at 18, 19, 20.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I went to college as well, and while I made good use of my time, I wasted so much of it as well. I think you brought up an interesting way of thinking about this, where you're thinking about like where you're at on your trajectory compared to your potential. I think it would be cool to like chart that out. If you're like, and this is relevant to what my college experience was like, is if your potential is here at age 18 and you settle for this is going to college. And every year, like your potential is on this curve and you just flatline for 4 years. Like you are behind. You're behind where you could have been if you were like pushing yourself up to the edge of like what you're capable of. And that's what I feel. That's like the remorse I feel about college when people ask me like, well, would you go again? It's like, well, that's a tough question to answer, because what I know now, like obviously I could go back and make better use of my time. Maybe I wouldn't have as strong of opinions, or I wouldn't realize the folly of some of those ways. But like I felt like in college, it was very easy to succeed at the game and give myself this false sense of confidence that I was making good use of my time, when I know what's out there on the other side. And it's like, if I would have been taking myself seriously and taking my potential seriously, I could have been operating at this level, like getting better answers about what it is I wanted to do, developing better skills, building more deeper relationships that weren't based on like surface level stupid college stuff. And like just trying to play the game. And so while there was probably a ceiling of like, here's your potential in college, here's your potential out in the real world, I was probably down here flirting with this line when I could have been up here. And that's what I think about like making the best use of your time. I don't think you even have to miss out on that season of your life per se. You can still build really cool relationships. You can still be a little bit of an idiot when you're just starting out. Like you don't have all the answers. Okay. You're going to make mistakes. You don't have to
if you value like when you think about like the stereotypical college social experience lifestyle, like if you value those things, like you can still attain those outside of the formal like attendance of college and everything.
Yeah. Well, and it's a lot cooler to go have a social life, a rich social life, when you can afford to do it, and when you're racking up student debt to cover, to subsidize the cost of stupid behavior. Like, and it's not just, your ability to afford it. It's like the deepness of the relationships you build when you are building those based on mutual interest, not because you both just happen to be in the same place at the same time. And maybe you don't really have a ton of actual interest overlap, or like you're not on the same path. You're not on the same like level of ambition or work ethic. You're just both here. Like that's part of the challenge of my challenge against the argument of like, well, you should go get that college experience anyway, because those relationships will last forever. It's like some of them you may find, if there's 25,000 people on campus, like you're bound to find a couple people that are on the similar trajectory, but don't just assume everybody there is like gonna match you in terms of like what you're trying to accomplish in life.
Well, and then the economic question of like compared to what alternative. Yeah. So if I go, from the ages of 18 to 21, 22, instead of going to college, I decide like, hey, I'm going to go intentionally move to, a city that I want to live in. I'm going to intentionally like focus on landing like early career opportunities with, companies where, I think like the types of people that I share values and interests with are located, I guarantee you're going to develop, stronger, higher quality relationships, compared to just defaulting to college, where like the college is the norm, just like going to high school is the norm. And yeah, it's different. There's more intentionality in like choosing to go to a particular college and relocating to wherever that area is, compared to like, oh, I'm in high school and everybody just goes to the, local public government school that's in my town. Like, yeah, there's more intentionality there, but compared to taking a more like independent, direct path to, opting out of that, kind of process. And then like, she's like, hey, I'm going to go move to a city. I'm going to go try to, work in a particular industry, career field that, I'm developing some initial curiosity and interest in. That's how you're going to really get the advantage of being around, people that are like-minded, share values that you can build real relationships with. And, I think all the things that people talk up about the college experience, you can get a higher quality experience outside of college environment.
Yeah, I think it comes down to skin in the game. When I think about the contrast between like going and being deliberate about those things in the context of I'm being an independent person rather than just kind of like cruising in college where I have no responsibilities, no expectations. Like I'm going to go out and I'm going to like be an independent person. I'm going to work, get experience. I'm taking myself seriously. I'm taking the cultivation of my highest potential seriously. Even if you are being a kid, having a fully cultivated social life, in the context of like the relationships you can access, the opportunities you can access, your other peers are more likely to meet you at your same level when they also have skin in the game. And I think that's part of the problem of college, and like trying to make a serious argument that college is a good place to develop your potential and answer all these other questions is if you're doing that in a way, if your college experience is predicated on this avoidance of reality or not bearing direct costs of that experience. Like you're taking on debt, you're foregoing the costs of that, or your parents are paying for it. And you have a 4-year free pass to just go do whatever. There's not much expected of you other than at the end of this, you got to graduate.
Yeah.
You see this all the time. Like people that are in college, they're not serious people. And then on the other side, when they finally go out into the real world and they're suddenly in a position where they're forced to be responsible for their lives, they begin to take more ownership and they begin to cultivate their interests a little bit more seriously. They begin to be more aware of opportunity costs of like, if I do this, I can't do this. And college shields you from that. And so it's not a great environment for people to be serious in their pursuit of the things they want to accomplish. And that's where I think like, you can gain a significant advantage in all those things. If you're a young adult who's like, college or not, I want to plant myself in soil where the other people around me are taking themselves seriously and they have skin in the game on the outcome they're aiming for, as opposed to like being in an environment that's operating on false pretenses altogether. It's very difficult to build deep relationships. It's very difficult to cultivate your interest in a deep, meaningful, actually useful way. But you can do that whether you go to college or not. You can do that by planting yourself in soil where people are taking independence. Maybe you're seeking out people who they're working while they're going to college, or you're skipping it all together and you're going and finding a group of people who are already young professionals. And those are the people you're surrounding themselves with. And I think we see this too with a lot of the young adults we work with is they get out into their real lives. And it's like suddenly this broad intellectual inventory of interest blossoms. It's like I'm suddenly interested in all these ideas that at age 17, 18, I wasn't. But once I got out in the real world, like I want to know how to be better. I want to know how to live a good life. I want to read about economics and philosophy and psychology. And I want to learn all these other things that can help me combat the challenges of life more effectively. And I think that until you go out there and get into the real world and you're taking responsibility for yourself, it's very difficult for those things to blossom naturally.
Yeah. Yeah. You need it's kind of comparing like old school philosophy, like Socrates and Plato, etc., like ancient, like Greek philosophy. It was very much like real world life application, thinking about, philosophical subjects and everything. Whereas today, when people think about philosophy, they think about like studying it within an academic environment.
Yeah.
And I think kind of like what we're talking about here is if you're not putting yourself in positions to have the skin in the game aspect of like being out in the real world where there are like consequences and opportunities at stake, rather than kind of being in some kind of sheltered environment, which, we've been talking about college a lot, but it's not just limited to college. I think that's the biggest difference is how can you put yourself in scenarios where you're out in the real world, you have to apply skills, you have to apply knowledge, you have to, kind of live where you're going to receive consequences and rewards of your decisions and actions in a much more intentional way. Like, I think that's what's missing. That's what people avoid when they're kind of following the traditional kind of typical education and career timeline that we expect of, 18 to 23-year-olds at this point, is you're delaying that real world feedback essentially.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell a story that's a little bit off subject, but I want to bring it home. And this is an embarrassing story on me. This is when we were roommates together. This is early in both of our careers. And I was responsible for paying the water bill. And one time I either forgot or I didn't set up auto draft. I don't remember the actual circumstances of how, but our water got shut off. And I remember getting that call and being the most embarrassed, just not even like that the water was shut off, but just embarrassed of myself that it's like, I think I was probably like 24, 25 at this time. But being like, I had this idea that by this age, being out in the real world, I had what it takes to like be a functioning adult and like be on top of my finances and being successful in my career and like know how to manage all this stuff and not just like survive, but thrive.
Yeah. Like you're taking personal pride in being like, hey, like I am capable and I'm achieving like what I want on a kind of somewhat of an accelerated timeline compared to others. And it's like, well, crap, like I can't even like, I didn't even pay our water bill for a few months and I'm like getting my water shut off. Like it just makes you feel bad about yourself. And it's not even like an actually big deal in reality. Cause it's like, all right, one call to the, water company, pay the overdue bills and like, you're good to go. It's not an actual like big consequence connected to that. But yeah, I totally understand what you mean where it's like,
it was a crisis of confidence.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I bring that story up because I think the default path gives people a false sense of confidence about their ability to go out in the real world and navigate the complexity of life. And the water bill is obviously like simple, silly example of the complexity of lives. But there's all these responsibilities waiting for you on the other side. And the longer you wait to face those and begin to learn how to combat them, the more difficult, not only the more difficult that it's going to be, the more embarrassing it's going to be when those complexities overwhelm you. Like go give yourself as much of a head start learning how to deal with all of the intricacies of like going out and living on your own, being an independent adult that's like trying to make the most of your potential.
Yeah, I think that sums it up nicely. It's hard to think of anything else to add to that, but yeah, I guess, I mean, one of the things I think about is there is no reason why at 18, 19, 17, 18, 19, you are not just as capable of
Yep.
doing the types of things that you think you're supposed to wait until 22, 23, 24 to do. And if just kind of breaking that mindset, and again, I don't care what you do individually in terms of like, should you go to college or not, or should you be in full on career mode or not right away. But I think it just starts with how, like, the admission of like, there's no reason it should not be encouraged to delay adulthood.
Yes.
And that's in all of our controls at the individual level. And you can make the choice of like, hey, like, I'm 18, I'm lacking like life skills. Like, great, everybody is at some point.
Yeah.
And just making the decision of, hey, I want to accelerate my own timeline to kind of getting this process started in whatever ways it makes sense for me at the individual level, I think is the big point.
Yep. That's a good way to wrap this up. Remember, take yourself seriously, take your potential seriously, pay your water bills. We'll be back again with another episode soon.